Hello, I'm Fiona Sifkin, a host of a talk show, The Bridge for Women Worldwide. Today, I'm hosting the new episode of The Bridge. Welcome, my friends.
Thank you.
In this talk show, as well as in my blog and the recent book, How They Made It in America, the focus is on women role models. Why? Because I would like all the people, especially women, to hear their stories and up their own lives using excellent ideas and blueprints. Today, we are talking about women's leadership and how women make this world a better place. The concrete topic today is how inclusive leadership works, starring Dr. Rohini Anand, who is our guest for today. She is principal and CEO of Rohini Anand LLC, also a former SVP corporate responsibility and global chief diversity officer of Sodexo, one of the biggest companies in the world. She is also author of the book Leading Global Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. Well, today you will hear a story of an authentic diversity, equity, inclusion professional. You will learn what it takes to turn around a limping diversity and inclusion of a huge company and make it work right. So please stay with us.
Thank you so much, Fiona. This is wonderful. I'm just delighted to be with so many impressive women. So thanks for inviting me today.
Thank you. I certainly am very happy to see you here. I loved working on your profile for my book, How They Made It in America. And here you are, right on top of the front cover. Here, the picture is right above. Who is this? Do you see?
I cannot see that.
Okay, this is Isabella Allende. So you're in good company. All right. You're a great role model, and you are also a living proof of how much the United States benefits from the diversity input. So let me introduce you properly here at the break. Ladies and gentlemen, I admire Dr. Rohini Anand for a reason. She is a strong woman, not only a former SVP of bigger than life diversity accomplishments, but also a today's board member of the Gold Foundation, the 10th Partnerships for Refugees, and also the Corporate Board Senior Fellow. She is also the author of a new book, Leading Global Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. Both in her book and in her practices, Rohini remains a remarkable thought leader and also a great practitioner and a great advisor on how to manage diversity. Thank you so much for joining our show, Rohini.
Thank you. Thanks.
Let me ask the first question. For starters, it will be 2 in 1, okay? How did your American career start and then restart? And was it your conscientious choice to do diversity and inclusion, or were there certain life circumstances and good luck involved?
So, I think that it's my life experiences that have brought me to the diversity, equity, and inclusion work. And I believe that moving to the US was an inflection point in my journey. I actually grew up in India. I was surrounded by others who looked like me. I was part of the majority religion. And as such, I didn't even think about my identity. I had the privilege of not thinking about my identity. When I moved to the US, I was perceived as an immigrant, as a foreigner, as an Asian American, and I learned to recognize myself as an Asian American. And it was that journey that made me realize the privileges that I had had as being part of a majority, something I had not reflected on earlier till I was perceived as a minority. So this is my life journey. It's my own experiences that brought me to the work I do. And my vocation and my avocation are perfectly aligned. So thanks for that question.
Thank you. Thank you so much for clarification. Well, you managed to distinguish yourself fairly quickly once you joined Sodexo. Would it be accurate to say that the support of Sodexo's CEO was critical for your success as diversity leader?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the CEO sponsorship was absolutely critical for my success. And I think that, that made me visible, he trusted me. And I will also say that it was my ability to build trusting relationships that really sort of accelerated my career. Let me give you a very quick example. So when I joined Sodexo, I like to say that I took Sodexo from class action to best in class. When I joined Sodexo, there was a legacy lawsuit filed by African Americans. It was a class action lawsuit that predated me, that was eventually settled for over $80 million.
Oh.
And here I was hired to address that particular situation. And I was very conscious of my Asian identity. I was not African American. I'd had my own share of experiences of being told that, go back to where you come from, or being told I speak English well, but that did not compare, and I did not have the lived experiences of my Black colleagues in the potent history of slavery in the United States. So it was very important for me to build very trusting relationships with my Black colleagues who became my allies. And it would, I would not have been successful without their partnership, without their allyship, and without their trust. So yes, it was the CEO and his sponsorship. It was my ability to build trusting relationships. And it was the others in the organization that supported me to be successful. So it takes a village.
Yeah. Support from up and support from down.
Yeah.
Perfect combination. Yes. Yeah. Well, thank you. Let me ask you now a tricky question. Was it cool or was it fun for you to be a global SVP, of such a huge company? And what I mean is, what were the pluses and minuses for you as a high-end executive on the one hand, and a mother of two girls on the other hand?
Yeah, so, I lived in a plane. So I love traveling, but after a point, it becomes challenging. So I love going to different countries, experiencing different cultures, meeting with colleagues. That was the fun part, right? But also, I did have two young girls growing up at home. And I have to say that without my support structure, without my husband, who was very much there, present for them, I would not have been able to do it. And I recall very clearly at one time when, the girls, my daughters, would basically call him. And I sort of felt very displaced. So I asked them, I said, how come you don't call me for these things, from school, or they need something? They said, well, Mom, we don't know where you are. We aren't able to reach you. So that was the downside. The downside was not being there, for them in the way that I would like, but I certainly made an effort to be there, on all the milestones. So, they've grown up to be, wonderful young girls. One of them is a lawyer who works on social justice issues. The other one is a physician who, addresses underserved populations. So I'm very, very proud of what they've done, and I learn from them every day. But certainly, yes, it was fun. It was not so much fun to be the only woman, sometimes in the executive suite, to be the only woman of color. To be a double only is not a pleasant experience. But at the same time, I wouldn't trade my experience for anything. So.
Well, yeah, that was a great experience. Of course, it was a great experience. Pluses and minuses, and your daughters now have you as a role model, I am sure. Like charity starts at home. You're a role model first for your family, for your near and dear, and then for the rest of the world. All right, thank you for sharing. I know that you are personally a great inclusive leader. After all, I researched you. I wrote a chapter on you in my book. So I know you managed to turn around the corporate culture of a big company, one of the biggest companies in the world. And this is not accomplished overnight, right?
Yeah.
Now, could you please put it in a nutshell? What were the stages of this longish process?
Yeah, so going to try and compress 18 years into a couple of bullets. But what I would say is that there were five key things, five principles, and these are sort of the principles that I articulate in my book. The first was that I had to localize the work I was doing. Now, issues of race are very palpable, present, and important in the United States, may not be so in the rest of the world. They don't show up the same way. So the first principle was make it local, understanding the issues that were relevant in the organization in the United States and addressing them by partnering with local change agents. So partnering with the African American colleagues, the colleagues in the company. The second is what I call leaders change to lead change. So I had, the support from leadership. Not all leaders were on board, but I had to meet them where they were and bring them along in this journey through some disruptive experiences. So for leaders to lead with purpose and passion, which is what happened in Sodexo, they had to go through a disruption of their own worldviews to be able to do that, to be committed and to really recognize the importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion to themselves and to the organization. And I was fortunate that we got to that point. The third thing that I would say we did was to have a very clear rationale for change. So, what was a compelling business case for doing this? The compelling business case is to get and keep talent. Sodexo is a people company. And the compelling business case is to make diversity, equity, and inclusion a differentiator, a competitive advantage to get clients and keep clients. The fourth, I would say, would be what I call go deep, wide, and inside out. And that's really embedding diversity, equity, and inclusion in all the processes and systems and externally. And lastly, having clear metrics and accountability. So it's all these five things that really help to transform the culture at Sodexo. And as I said before, we took it from class action to best in class.
Yeah, great road, great road. Yeah. Thank you for sharing, Rohini. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Now, let me ask you a question interesting specifically for our audience of women. I'd like to ask you about promoting women within your company. I remember you had great plans. How did they go?
Yeah, so I think there are several ways of measuring that. Certainly, when you look at representation of women in leadership roles, it increased from 17% when we started this work to 34% recently. So there was significant progress that was made. The second would be, I think women were made visible to the organization as leaders. So they, had more of a chance of being successful in positions. And the third would be that the culture change. And the way we measured that was in our employee engagement survey. The responses of women were very positive in terms of the culture change, women and people of color, minorities. So I would say that, both in terms of representation as well as in terms of creating an inclusive culture, it was a very positive story.
Well, thank you. I am a big believer of women helping women, big believer. That's why I started the Bridge talk show,
Right.
by women, for women. And today our viewers have a chance to learn from you. Thank you for coming again. All right, now let us talk about your book. Could you please share some key points of your book? Well, first of all, of course, congratulations on having written this book. And second, please tell us what's inside, all right?
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for allowing me to talk about it. So this is basically, the book is based on my lived experience. It's not an academic book. It's not a book written by consultants. It's about what I did in terms of my lived experiences. And what I realized was when I started, it was supposed to be more of a, how you do this work. But I realized really that this is as much about changing ourselves to change others. So, the 5 principles that I mentioned, the book essentially has these 5 principles, starting with making it local. So really, when you do global diversity, equity, and inclusion work, it has to be contextualized to the local history, to the laws, to the culture of a local place. And with that understanding of the local situation, we can push for change as outsiders. But when we push for change, it's not about accepting the status quo. It's about pushing for change, but doing it in partnership with local change agents. So that's the first principle. And I talk about several examples of companies that have done that, as well as around examples around race and how you can address that in a global context, which is a very, very tricky subject, as you know. The second principle that I talk about is what I call leaders change to lead change. And I give many examples of how leaders have changed their worldview. So, I talked about Sodexo and where leaders were pretty resistant initially to this topic and how they changed because of a disruptive experience that they were provided. So they changed their worldview to really lead this topic with purpose and passion. And in fact, one of the CEOs, when he retired, the only thing he chose to do was to be on diversity, equity, and inclusion advisory boards. And this was someone who was very resistant initially. So that's a second. The third one that I talk about is, and it's good for business too. So 70% of change efforts fail because there's not a clear narrative around why people are, initiating a change effort. So developing a change rationale, whatever it is, needs to be aligned with the business model and with the geography and the culture of the region. The fourth is go deep, wide, and inside out. And here I talk about having a governance structure to scale your diversity efforts, going deep through local champions, and going inside out by embedding diversity, equity, and inclusion in all of your processes, talent processes, marketing, supply chain, as well as externally. And then lastly, know what matters and count it. So having clear metrics. So when you asked me about the progress for women, we had a target of 40% women by 2025. So clearly we're heading in that direction. So having clear metrics and holding teams accountable. So these are the 5 principles that I discussed. And then talk about the future of diversity, equity, and inclusion and what we need to do to make more progress. So thanks for allowing me. And the thing is, it's not to do global work. There's no checklist. There's no menu. It really is a principles-based approach, which allows local leaders to be flexible in how they apply it, because that's what you need in global DEI, flexibility.
Yeah. So. Thank you for sharing. Of course, metrics is the key. And you also showed how to implement those metrics. That's great.
Yeah.
Thank you. Now, let me ask you this. When exactly is the book coming out? And where can we buy it? That's important.
Thank you. So the book is being released on November 30th. It's available for pre-order, November 30th of this year. It's available for pre-order on Amazon, on Barnes & Noble, and you can also purchase it on Book Depository for those that are international, as well as at your local bookstore.
Let us discuss the values that helped you become you and accomplished personality that you are today. As you know, my book, How They Made It in America, discusses 7 common values of successful women. 7 common values. Now, which of these values do you, Rohini, hold close to your heart? Which ones helped you the most? Could you please elaborate?
Sure. I know I don't have time to go through all of them, so let me just pick 2. One I would say would be perseverance. The work is about long haul. It's about, keeping at it, chipping away, one person at a time sometimes. It's about meeting resistance and pushing through resistance by influencing, not taking things personally, but meeting people where they are and helping them to move along on the spectrum. So I would say perseverance. In fact, one of the CEOs actually said to me, he said, "You're like Teflon," meaning that, nothing can kind of ruffle me or scratch me because I know the vision where I'm headed. So that would be one. The second, I would say, would be strategic thinking. So I think strategic thinking is absolutely critical in doing any change work. And to me, this is about having a clear vision of where you're headed, holding on to that vision, but at the same time, having small wins, doing the execution. I remember clearly, if you see behind me, there's a picture of a woman who's in white. That is Dorothy Height. And Dorothy Height was a civil rights fighter. She headed an organization called NCNW, National Council of Negro Women. Amazing woman. And I remember clearly she had come to speak to at our organization when she was 95 years old. Wore these beautiful hats. She was in a wheelchair. She never wore glasses, didn't have a scrap of paper for notes. And one of the things she said stayed with me. She said, "Leaders are dreamers with shovels in their hands." And I think that is just so, to me, that's what strategic thinking is. It's holding on to a vision, but at the same time, having the small wins in order to make progress. So to me, it's perseverance and strategic thinking that I would say, would be the two that I would, choose to speak to. I mean, all of them are very important, but I think those two would be very critical for me. I think the other is equally important. I don't know about American mindset, but the other is certainly very important.
Thank you so much for sharing, Rohini. Of course, perseverance is your middle name as well as strategic thinking. Thank you for sharing. Yours is a success story of a leader who is in constant motion. That's my understanding. You're like a movable feast. Thank you for being a role model, Rohini. And again, good time launching your book, and let it be and you a success.
Thank you very much.
Let us now thank our viewers, our audience for watching The Bridge for Women Worldwide. Please subscribe to our channel. It is now 7,000 subscribers strong and counting. And let us connect using the following links. The Bridge for Women Worldwide, please leave a comment. My book website, www.fionasitkin.com, and then my email. Again, thank you so much for being here for us and listening to us. And now Rohini and I are wishing all of our viewers worldwide to be strong and healthy for years to come. We salute you. Bye-bye.